one of the things about photographs is, you know, throughout the early 1900s, Aboriginal people, you know, here on what's now the Gold Coast, you know, genuinely sort of lived in fear of the government coming along and taking children away. So there was a real motivation for Aboriginal people to work really hard and conform. And that's what I see in the photos. I see photos of Aboriginal people who were actually economically doing quite well. I mean, partly because if they didn't work hard and earn money and fit into European society, they really were at risk of losing their children or the police sending them off to a reserve somewhere else away from their country. So, you know, hard-working Aboriginal people, like, you know, photos I always remember is, you know, my grandfather in around 1930 with a bullock team. He was carting timber, but he owned that bullock team. You know, that was an achievement for an Aboriginal guy in the 1930s. He sold that team and worked here in the Gold Coast, carting gravel around for the local council with a truck that he owned himself. You know, he had a big boat. He worked as a professional fisherman. He owned that boat. And so many of my grandfather's, my grandmother's relatives, my mum's generation of cousins, they worked in sand mining, they worked in fishing, they worked in earth moving, you know, building canals. You know, you just see, and you see it in the photos, you see, and they had the money to buy cameras, or in the earlier days they had money to walk into photographic studios as paying customers and have their photos taken in the very early 1900s through to the sort of 1920s, 1930s. When cameras started to become affordable for amateurs, and members of my family had the money, you know, they'd buy cameras, take photos, and they were generally taking photos of their successes, taking photos of like my grandfather with his bullock team or my grandfather with his truck that he owned, you know, people dressed up in their good clothes. And so to me, you know, there's just so much politics in those stories, you know, so much politics in the photos and the stories associated with them. And yet for other, you know, sometimes I get a bit disappointed today. Some people don't see that as important Aboriginal history, and all they want to see is, you know, Aboriginal performers with red lap-laps and body paint on and didgeridoos, singing and dancing and clapping boomerangs. When to me that's not the version of Aboriginal history I grew up with. I grew up surrounded by hard-working Aboriginal people that were just trying to survive, you know, politically. You know, it was a political story. And to me, you know, the Aboriginal people doing corroborees is a different story in it. And I'm in fear of next year in the Commonwealth Games how my history is going to be represented. And I'm sure it'll be more of a theme park version of history with painted up Aboriginal people with didgeridoos and clapsticks and probably no mention of the real life stories my family lived through over the last 100 years or so here on the Gold Coast.